And we are back with the Warwick F1 show looking at the US Grand Prix, but obviously I can't do this on my own, so I'm joined with a few guests. Firstly, we've got my co-host, as ever, Jack. How you doing, Jack?
Hello, I'm doing pretty well. Here to review a pretty average US Grand Prix, right? I mean, there was nothing. I think what you said before was interesting, right?
Yeah.
But the key distinction between interesting and exciting, I guess we're going to go over in the next 2 hours to an hour and 50 now, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come to that a bit later, but I've got to introduce some more of my guests. Firstly, a regular on the show, Chinmay. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I'm going to have to disagree with you a little bit, Jack. I think I kind of did enjoy the US Grand Prix. Yes, there wasn't as much on-track action as we would like, but I really loved just being really thrilled and tense about all the tyre strategies happening throughout the race.
Yeah, and finally, a first-time guest on the show, we have Tom. How you doing, Tom?
Yeah, hi, I'm not too bad. I really enjoyed the race, to be honest with you, but I don't know if that's just because we're in a packed-out pub or not.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
You've missold him there as well. This is the president of Warwick F1 Society we have in. I feel like we should hype that up a little bit.
I didn't want to get his title wrong because I see you're wearing a Bra Society Social Sec t-shirt, so I just wanted to make sure I was getting it right.
It's just a comfy hoodie, to be honest with you. I am now the president of F1 Soc, and that's the important deal here. Brass is in the past now.
Yeah, he's the ruler, he's in charge. But I guess what we'll do first, because we've had a bit of debate over how we found the race, each of you, could you give me, what would you give that race out of 10? So, I mean, we'll start with you, Tom.
Yeah, like I said, I enjoyed the race, but I don't know if that's because it was a good race or a good atmosphere. So I'm going to go with a 6, maybe, because the racing itself wasn't immense.
Okay. Chinmay?
I'll probably go for about 6.5. I mean, like Tom said, there wasn't a lot of race, but the strategies were really, really fun to watch.
I mean, we've had this dispute before, right? When it was the Turkish Grand Prix, and you guys find it less interesting than I did. So I think traditionally I find the strategy stuff more interesting, but this time there was just something a bit off about it. Like before, there was excitement. There was just nobody knows what's going on, but I think from the moment that Verstappen pitted and it was clear that Mercedes didn't go straight after, then it was just a bit like, well, I think they've done the better strategy here. And if I was proven wrong, maybe it'd be a better score, but I'm going to have to go with a 6 as well. Yeah,
so all gone for a 6. I'd say I'd give it about a 6 as well. I mean, do you think that it was probably because of what we could have had as opposed, and then what we got, so there's that difference? So we've got, after Saturday, we've got a Verstappen-Hamilton front row into a first corner that is good for incidents. Then even during the race, we've got Hamilton closing in on Verstappen closing in on Hamilton, but then it never really went anywhere. Obviously there's the tension of the final few laps, but it ended before it could get good in a way.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. The first, I think, 11 laps Verstappen pitted on. From then on, it was just, there was nothing really to it. There was no wheel to wheel or anything like that. It was all for track position.
Yeah, I think I fully agree as well. I mean, we had maybe, say, 2-3 more incidents after lap 11, after Verstappen surprisingly pitted a bit early. But yeah, I mean, there was not much on-track action after lap 1.
I don't know. I felt like there was a little bit of on-track action. We had the Alpines, and we had a couple of moves from, I think Vettel was getting up. There were moves, but the one thing that makes a race really exciting is having a strong storyline running through it, right? And we just didn't have that. I mean, last race we had Sainz coming through, and Hamilton as well with engine penalties recently, but it just wasn't there this race. There was just, I don't know, it felt all spectacle until the race began, and then nothing.
I mean, I think that was it in a way. It was very status quo in a way. You had your Hamilton and Verstappen going towards the front. I think they were 40 seconds ahead of everyone else by the end of the race. The midfield, there was no midfield or upper midfield like your Ferraris, your McLarens, or even your Bottas and Perez. They were all fairly near the front of the field. They weren't coming through. So it was just, it was one of those races that seemed to flatter to deceive in a way. There wasn't really that much action, and everyone was sort of where they were meant to be.
Yeah, although you didn't really even have, the Ferrari-McLaren battle so much. There was a little bit going on, but there was minimal overtakes between the four of them. It just kind of ended up sort of where it started, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, not much action. Ferrari, McLaren, we kind of expected a lot more, especially with them so close to each other in the grid. But after lap 1, after all that shenanigans around towards in the last sector in the first lap, there wasn't really much to go around. And there's so much almost overtaking, but not really overtaking happening much. But I think one thing that did surprise, Ferrari had the fastest pit stop off the race.
Did they?
Yes.
Did they? I didn't see that. Obviously, we know the pit stops have slowed down now, but that is a surprise. I mean, do you want to add anything, Jack?
Was that the 2.2 second one they did right at the start? Okay, because I remember everyone saw that and went, oh, wow, and then I think that's the most exciting thing that happened for about 10 laps.
Yeah, I don't think I really remember that, to be honest. I might have been at the bar at the time, but I remember them putting up a Red Bull pit stop that looked quite quick. I assumed that would have been the fastest one of that, because I asked someone if that was the world record one, or whether that was from, this season, or what it was.
It's 1.88 the world record, right?
8.2, I had a feeling,
Which
but it might
is
be 8.8.
How do you change 4 tyres in 1.82 seconds?
I can't even say pit stop in 1.82
Yeah.
seconds.
So 1.82 seconds is now to now. That was about 2 seconds. So under that, to change 4 tyres and do whatever else, that is very impressive. But I mean, overall, do we think there was any real reason why the race didn't pan out as exciting as we were expecting? Was it the tyres? Was it the track layout? Was it something else?
I mean, it's a bit of both, isn't it? I mean, yeah, 2 stops shouldn't prevent exciting racing. If it should kind of generate that more. But yeah, I guess it's a mixture of the track and it's the cars as well, right? I think we've really been treated this season. We've had a lot of exciting races where there shouldn't be exciting races, and we've talked about that before. But sometimes it just can't work out like that. It needs that element of luck or spice or something to make it exciting with these cars. And there just wasn't that. That first sector is quite difficult to follow in as well. You've got the 3 through to 7, very, very twisty. Doesn't fit with the cars. So I think it's not even bad luck. It's just no luck at all. Neither way. So yeah, I don't know what else to say. We've really been treated this season.
Actually, that is a thing quickly. If we had this race in other seasons, it wouldn't be, I'd say, one of the worst ones. But it just seems to be that this season we've had so many, extremely good races that when we get one like this, it wasn't even a bad race. It was just a fairly standard race. There were no, as Jack said, storylines coming through. We're putting it as one of the lower ones of the season as opposed to one of the upper ones.
The problem with COTA, I think, is that every season it's sort of Mercedes run away with it, don't they? Obviously, you had, Kimi came through and won, was it 2018? But other than that, it's just been a Mercedes stronghold the whole time. So this is basically as good as we could have hoped for a race at COTA, but because it's this season, it is so far low, down the order, only getting a 6 or whatever it was.
I mean, do you want to add anything just to finish off this segment?
Yeah, I think it's just that COTA doesn't really have many places to overtake owing to despite the length of the circuit. I think off the top of my head, we've only really seen overtakes at 3 different points at the end of the back straight, the pit straight, and maybe during the final sector we may see 1 or 2 final overtakes. But yeah, it's just not many overtakes not many chances to overtake there.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say decent race, not one of the best ones this season, but after the break we'll come back and we'll talk about Hamilton and Verstappen, but we're back on the Warwick F1 show, where we'll talk about our title rivals for the season and title and race rivals for this Grand Prix, Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. So Hamilton getting the lead at the start, which is, I think, what I was hoping for, especially after qualifying, and looking. I mean, what would you say? Was he looking comfortable in the lead, or was Verstappen really putting the pressure on?
No, it's, well, as much as you can see that, these cars are difficult to follow, Verstappen definitely had the faster pace. I think Lewis said so 3 or 4 laps in. But no, it was a brilliant start, wasn't it? It was exactly what you wanted. Verstappen really squeezing Hamilton to the inside, but getting through anyway. It was clean enough, but there was still, they were clearly going at it. Hammer and tongs. So no, it was a great start. But yeah, I think Verstappen had the pace. If Hamilton hadn't gotten in front right at the start, maybe we'd be talking about an even more dull race.
I mean, it was very reminiscent of 2015 between Hamilton and Rosberg. Obviously, Hamilton again that day starting second, getting the better start, and forcing Verstappen off the track. But I think maybe because Verstappen had the faster car, he didn't seem too fussed about that, did he?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we saw in qualifying that Verstappen managed to get 2 tenths off than Hamilton as well. And I felt that Verstappen had that confidence to really push that car and really take the battle to Hamilton all the way through.
Yeah, and I mean, so after that, Verstappen behind Hamilton for 11 laps or so before he pits and tries to do the undercut. I mean, then obviously we have the AWS graphics, and they were saying like 60% chance, 70% chance, and you sort of knew as soon as Hamilton didn't come in on that first lap that he would be trying to do a different strategy.
Yeah, I thought at the time, as soon as Verstappen came in, I thought really Mercedes have 2 options. They've either got to come in straight away and try and match the strategy, or they go really long. And in the end, they didn't do either. They sort of, 3-4 laps? Then they came in. And it looked like the opportunity had gone, really, because Verstappen came out, second half, multiple seconds ahead, and that was that, really.
Yeah, but I mean, it wasn't really Mercedes' fault, because obviously Red Bull had pitted Perez. I'm not sure how far behind. Does anyone know how far behind Perez was? But when before they pitted, obviously.
I think there was risk of undercut or coming out behind Perez, wasn't there? So I think it might have been 21 seconds or something like that.
So obviously, if he dropped behind Perez, then that's the race over, essentially. So they sort of had to pit, which, I mean, it's not ideal, is it?
No, not really. It looked like they were caught in 2 minds almost. Obviously, they weren't. They had no option, like you said. But yeah, it really just didn't work out in their favour based on where Perez was.
I mean, so yeah, obviously that means Hamilton comes out behind Verstappen, but at that point, I mean, the middle of the race, like a lot of the races we've seen this season, sort of just sitting there. But then it was the second pit stops that really started to make that difference. Verstappen coming in on lap 27, one of the.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah.
Wasn't it like lap 30 or something? I swear it was like halfway through the race.
Yeah, that might have been it. I think I was reading it's like 27. He had like 27 laps to go. So yeah, lap 30. Hamilton coming in 8 laps later, coming out with about 9 seconds to go. And I think that's sort of what they wanted to do initially. They wanted to go like 8 laps later instead of like 3 or 4 in the first stint, but obviously they couldn't.
Yeah, what I want to know is why they came out on hards, why they didn't push it a couple laps later and then try mediums. Like, I felt, okay, it nearly worked for them. It really did nearly work for them. But if they believed they had the pace on Red Bull anyway, then, well, I mean, clearly they didn't, unless things had changed in the second half of the race, but they didn't have the pace on Red Bull. So I think they should have tried something different. I think, again, they went for that. They tried to do something different initially and didn't have the choice, but they had that opportunity. Obviously I don't have the screens, I don't have the information they have. Maybe there was some significant reason why they didn't, but yeah, again, it could if Hamilton had managed to get past, I'd look dumb suggesting that, but that was my immediate thought. Why are they on hards?
That is an interesting one, because obviously we've seen the tyre degradation is really high, How many laps Hamilton managed 14 laps on his mediums at the start, obviously with 3 or 4 laps in qualifying, so that's would make that 18 laps. He theoretically might have been able to. I think the thought might have just been, would he have tyres at the end to overtake Verstappen, especially on mediums?
I think I just felt that the Mercedes probably didn't want to take too much of a risk by going to the mediums because the tyre degradation did seem to be really high at the start. Yes, obviously the cars will be much lighter because of less fuel load, but I think when Verstappen pitted and was at lap 11, I think the mediums are already dropping off horrendously after that. I think by the time Hamilton pitted, he got to I think he might have cut 5-6 seconds out Hamilton's lead.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, you want to add anything, maybe why they didn't go onto the mediums? Because it is a strategy we've seen before, less tyre degradation or less degrading tracks. Like, I think they did it, Mercedes did it at Barcelona, Red Bull did it at Paul Ricard, so maybe why do you think Mercedes didn't try it here at COTA?
Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely worth the go, isn't it? Because obviously you're looking at, what was the gap, did you say? Right, by the time the second pit stops came around, what was the gap looking like?
I think he came out with about 9 seconds, about 9 seconds behind.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at that gap, and he's pitted onto the hards, and you're kind of thinking, well, surely they've got to try something new. So like Jack said, it's worth a go on the mediums, and sure, it could have worked out, but it didn't. And I think the mediums wouldn't have dropped off, that quick. It's all about data, really, isn't it? Yeah, we're sat here talking about that, but we don't have all the screens in front of us. But the mediums would have lasted 15 laps, I think, fairly easily.
Yeah, though to be fair to Mercedes, after they made that second pit stop, it did look like Hamilton was going to catch Verstappen. After a few laps of just hanging back a bit, I guess just conserving energy, fuel, things like that, Hamilton put in, I think, about 4 or 5 seconds in as many laps to get within about 3 seconds. And you thought that if he was doing that, he was going to catch up quite easily. I mean, I was walking back from something. I'd watched the first half of the race, but then missed this bit. So I'll come to you three. How were you sort of feeling when you saw that Hamilton was gaining 5-6 tenths of a second per lap?
I think, to be fully honest, I thought Hamilton would have got Verstappen within about 7-8 laps to go, especially with fresher tyres, cutting the gap so much quicker, and Hamilton was clearing the traffic so much faster than Verstappen. I just kind of felt the race was almost over, but obviously it wasn't.
Yeah, he gave us a last couple of exciting laps in a fairly mediocre race, but it was the way that Hamilton, like you said, he was ploughing his way through that time. He was catching seconds a lap, and you definitely thought, oh yeah, he's going to have him here 100%. But as soon as he got within a couple of seconds, I don't know whether Verstappen found some more time or whether the tyres started degrading a little bit, but then he just he wasn't pulling the same times, was he?
Yeah, I mean, he got down to, I think, 3 seconds with about 10, 15 laps to go, but then was just struggling to follow. I don't know if it was the way the Mercedes set up. I think Red Bull was saying that they thought the Mercedes was set up much more for the straights, but obviously if you can't follow through that sector 1, then you're not going to get the DRS down the back straight, so you can't take that benefit in a way. And we saw that because I think it was for the last 5-6 laps the gap was below 2 seconds but above a second, and it was getting really tense. And for me it was getting quite frustrating because you think Hamilton takes out 1 lap to get in the DRS, then you've sort of got that you're attached to it, Verstappen at the front, and you're not going to let that go, but he couldn't make it.
Well, we've seen the dirty air be a problem before for Mercedes, and they were right up until about 1.5 seconds, and then that little gap to get them into DRS, that's where they started to see the problems, I think, and they just couldn't pull it within the second by the time it got to the straights, which, had they got within DRS, he's flying away, but they didn't, so he didn't.
Yeah, and I think it was just that first sector, you were right, is really difficult to follow him, but when he was far enough away that dirty air wasn't so affecting him, he was really quick in the first sector, because that's just where Mercedes were quick. And we were in the pub, and it was you could see 3/10 faster, and there'd be a massive cheer, or it'd be like, because there's let's be real, F1 fan base is pretty split, right? Max and Lewis fans, but we got such an atmosphere that people aren't booing, which is great. So we had like, you might have only had half the people cheering, but it sounded like the entire pub was cheering for both drivers. It was great. There was one point, I think, maybe with 1 lap to go, that he got under that 1 second barrier, and then he just lost it. He lost 7/10 or something in one sector. I'm not entirely sure what happened, whether he had a moment, or I think it's the last 2 sectors of the lap. But yeah, it's crazy that, he won by a second, but it might have come down to that 2/10 difference in one sector.
Yeah, I mean, it just like in the pub, I think everybody was just so tense. They're seeing 2/10 far, we're seeing going down to 0.9, 0.8, 0.7, and suddenly you're going back to 1.1 seconds. He's coming out DRS range. It was just like the whole conflict and emotion was just so quick and so tense. It was just really, really difficult to fathom what was actually going on in that sector and as well.
Yeah, but even right at the end, it didn't come without drama when on the final lap, second last lap, or penultimate lap, Mick Schumacher, obviously driving a Haas, driving, to be fair, quite well, especially compared to his teammate, who was 87 seconds down on Mick Schumacher. By the end of that, I'm not sure what was going on with Mazepin there, but he's behind, or Verstappen's behind Schumacher, obviously with the blue flags, but it's in sector 3. It's really difficult to let a driver past, and it almost led to Hamilton getting that DRS, but in the end, Hamilton didn't get the DRS and Verstappen did. I mean, I know Horner said after it that aged him 25 years, and I mean, blue flags. So should we be critical of Schumacher for not letting Verstappen through, even though it was really difficult to do so, or was he all right and it ended up being okay, especially because Verstappen got the DRS on the front straight?
I mean, we're back to the whole consequences and actions argument, aren't we, right? Because you're right, Verstappen did get the DRS because of the back marker in front of him, and it worked out probably fairly evenly for him. But it could have been the absolute opposite way around. So I would have to go back and have a look at his onboard again if we have the opportunity. But I did think at the time he should have let him through a corner before, or that straight before. Yeah, that's my opinion anyway.
But then if he lets him through a corner before, let's say, what was it? It would be turn 17. So he goes like wide at turn 17, lets the two of them past. Then Verstappen doesn't get that DRS, but Hamilton's a lot closer, probably in the DRS, and we could have had a final. Well, if he gets the DRS on the front straight, he's within 6-7 tenths. If Hamilton can have like a barnstorming first sector, stay within that margin, then we've got a final lap, final back straight, where anything could have happened, and Hamilton could have won the race probably because of a back marker.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about that concept of what ifs. It's like, what if Schumacher let Verstappen and Hamilton through the corner before or a corner later? It's a bit, yeah, it's very, very interesting to see what could have happened if Hamilton definitely could have got that DRS or not.
Yeah, it's all about the onboard, really, isn't it? We're going to have to go back and have a look at that. But it sometimes it is quite hard to get, to position yourself to get out the way. We've seen Mazepin struggle with that a few times this year, going back to Portimao as a key example. But it is sometimes very hard to get out of the way. So I'm struggling to fault Mick too much without having seen his onboard. But like you said, it would be very interesting to see how it would have played out, because Hamilton was closing in quick at that point. And
yeah, I guess just to finish it off, we see in IndyCar there's no blue flags, and I know I watched a race at Laguna Seca this year where like Grosjean was coming through the field trying to catch the two up front, and was having to overtake the back markers on merit. He was having to put in those moves, and especially when there's your teammate, or I think one of the drivers in the top two had their teammate, I think it was Rossi at the back. So obviously Rossi wants to hold up Grosjean so he doesn't catch the front two. And I mean, do you think that this is, I guess, a two-part question. Do you think that blue flags should be in F1, or should we have to overtake on merit? And then if they were, do you think there'd be a lot more strategy revolving around them?
To answer the first part, I absolutely think they should be in F1, blue flags, because and then this kind of answers the second part as well. If they were to be not there, someone like Perez, for instance, if he's dropped back, 40 seconds in this race, if he just drops back another 30 seconds, lets Verstappen pass, then he can hold Hamilton up, can't he? Get right in his way and actually race him because he's got a competitive car.
Yeah, I think there's 3 key distinct differences between IndyCar and Formula One, and this is going to change next year, so maybe we need to look at it again. But number one, IndyCar are always racing up against each other. That's because they can follow, because their car aero is as simple as it comes, frankly. They have to race on oval circuits and street circuits as well, so they can't have low to the ground. I mean, we saw in Detroit this year the bumps were incredible in IndyCar. Kind of leading on from that, their cars are they're not indestructible, but they take damage a lot easier than F1 cars do. If if Schumacher hits Verstappen and knocks off his front wing, and then Verstappen loses the race, that's incredible difference to make. Whereas in IndyCar, if your back marker gets in the way and you get a little bit of tyre rub, it's probably not going to affect you so much. Okay. Third key difference is exactly what Tom said. Kind of what Tom said, that the differences between F1 and IndyCar in pace are kind of more extreme as well. So you can have your teammate, even though he's in the same car as you, be that lap behind, come and help out your teammate. But in IndyCar, you're unlikely to be doing that deliberately.
Okay. And any last words, Chinmay?
No, not really.
Well, we've got a little bit of personal experience on this front, because we did a karting event a few days ago, which was an endurance event about 3 hours long, and it meant that we finished, our B team finished 11 laps down from the leader, and so we were basically just racing everyone, getting in everyone's way and holding people up. And I personally, I don't remember, but a lot of people I saw on our team getting fingers waved at them. So I feel like that would become the case very quickly if blue flags were removed in F1.
Yeah, I mean, Mazepin's as much of a block now with blue flags. It'll be quite interesting to see what he'd be like without them. But we'll take a quick break. After we come back, we'll talk about, we'll focus on the bigger picture with Verstappen and Hamilton, what the scene's looking like with 6 races to go, and whether we think Verstappen is finally ready to become a world champion. But welcome back to the Warwick F1 show. I'm here with Chinmay, Jack and Tom, and we're going to keep our discussion of Max Verstappen going, and talk about just his overall performance, this weekend and just in general this season. I mean, I felt, and from what I've been reading, that I'd say this was one of his best wins of the season, and probably one of his best wins of his career, in a way.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think he was very dominant throughout the race. He kept his head. He seemed to know what he was doing all the time. He drove the socks off that Red Bull in the end, considering he finished, 44 seconds ahead of Perez or something like that.
And I think especially it wasn't even the dominance, because we've seen dominant performances from Verstappen before. I think Malaysia 2017, he dominated that race. Obviously, the 2 Austrian races this year got his first Grand Slam of his career. But it was more that he was able to keep Hamilton behind him for so long and in such close proximity. And the amount of pressure that Hamilton, Hamilton especially, must put on a driver when they're behind him, that must be incredible to have to deal with.
Yeah, it's the pressure of the situation kind of in the short term in that race, trying to hold on to that victory, but it's also the pressure of the long term of knowing that this is a massive point swing, and I'm sure the team will try and keep his mind on the job, but I don't know how much of you is thinking, I cannot lose this, because it was a 13-point swing or a 14-point swing. the championship now is incredibly different to what it would be if Lewis put that overtake in on the last couple of laps. Especially so different because no one's had a 10-point lead since about halfway through the season. It's been so close. And honestly, I think if it comes back and it's as close as we're expecting at Abu Dhabi, then this could be a real turning point in the season. So yeah, absolutely. Quality drive from him, but he put it in when it matters, and that's what makes a really that's what separates a great driver from a good driver. That's so overused. It is, but it's true.
I mean, yeah, the point swing is something to talk about because so it was a 6-point swing, so it went from 6 to 12. But let's assume that Hamilton gets him in the final 2 laps, so Verstappen can't pit for the fastest lap. So Hamilton keeps that fastest lap, gets 26. Instead of being 12 points behind, he's 2 points ahead, if I'm right.
Yeah, you are indeed.
Yeah, so, I mean, Chinmay, we've had a lot of points this season where when we look back on the end of the season, either looking at a Hamilton 8th title or a Verstappen 1st title, we've had a lot of points where you could say the championship wasn't decided, but we had big swings. We've had, for Verstappen, like, if Hamilton wins the championship, look at Verstappen's crash in Britain, crash in Baku, or not his fault in Hungary. Actually, I would say none of them have been his fault, but those DNFs are effective DNFs, as we saw in Hungary. If we look to Hamilton, we think maybe the Monaco strategy that didn't go so well. France probably could have won there. Spa, especially if we'd had that race. And even if he'd got into that second place, if George Russell hadn't been so good, and now we come to here as well. So there's a lot of points that could have switched hands. And I mean, do you agree with Jack that this is one of those races where if we look back on it, we can say, oh, that was one of the races that meant Verstappen wins the championship?
I think we can definitely see it. I think especially within the next few tracks that we're going to, we historically we see that Red Bull will have a lot of advantage coming into those races, and especially with the way Verstappen's been driving in the last few races alone, I think if he does not DNF or Hamilton does, or any external factors happen, I feel that Verstappen definitely has a good chance of taking this championship from Lewis Hamilton, because I don't feel there's anyone more hungry than Verstappen to win this championship at the moment.
I mean, with the possible exception of Hamilton, I mean, do you think that one DNF would decide it now? We've got 5 races to go, races that sort of, I'd say they're fairly balanced between Red Bull and Mercedes, or at least what we think of as Red Bull and Mercedes tracks. We're coming to, in the next 2, we're coming to Mexico, especially looking like a Red Bull track. Brazil, that's always seemed to be more of a Red Bull track in the past. Obviously, we had 2018 Verstappen leading before colliding with Ocon. Probably should have taken that win. 2019, a lot of pressure. Verstappen always seemed to be in control. Hamilton always seemed to be on the back foot, and then obviously colliding with Albon in Brazil. But then we come to the Middle East, where Mercedes have been a lot more dominant in the past. We've got Losail. We've never been there. We don't really know what it's going to be like. We've got Jeddah again. We've never been there. We don't really know what it's going to be like. And then we've got Abu Dhabi, which tended to be Mercedes in the past, but Verstappen wins there in 2020. So, would you say that one DNF decides it? I've got to try and get back onto the question. I went on a bit of a monologue there.
I don't know about decides it, but it definitely throws a spanner in the works for either team. I think if Hamilton's to DNF, it probably does decide it for Max, because 8 points and then that extra potentially 26 that's a big deficit to make up in 4 races. Whereas if Max is to DNF, then what's 26 minus 8?
12 points at the moment.
Oh, was it 12?
12 points.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking it was 8.
Yeah, 12 points.
Yeah. Then, it's not 14 or so. It's not a massive gap to make up. It's a bit, but it's not, extensive.
Yeah, and I mean, even if a DNF doesn't happen, we very realistically could be looking at the final race of the season mattering this time. It hasn't mattered since 2016. Then obviously 17, it was decided in Mexico.
I think.
18 was
also Mexico. 19 was 19 was Austin. Yeah.
Then 20 was Turkey. Oh yeah, 20 was Turkey. Obviously, bit of a different one there. And then 2021, it could be Abu Dhabi again. And I think that is what we want to see, isn't it? We want to see the title go down to the final race of the season. Even if it isn't at a track that we'd like it to be, I think we'd all agree that Interlagos makes for a better end of the season. I'd say even if we keep it in the Middle East, I'd like to see like a Bahrain end the season. Can you imagine how tense? Like, we remember back to the Bahrain Grand Prix at the start of the season, how tense that race was. If a title's on the line there, the drama is like off the scale.
Yeah, it'd be absolutely crazy, that, wouldn't it? You remember Hamilton's baseball celebration? That was in Bahrain, wasn't it? Yeah. Imagine that as a title-winning celebration. Oh, it'd be crazy.
I mean, like, you couldn't ask for many better tracks than Bahrain to have a good championship. A track that's very known to be good for racing. It's definitely one track that would definitely deliver for finale.
But I guess what I'll do is I'll bring it back to what I was sort of thinking about at the start of the segment, which is about Max Verstappen. So we've had it this season. He hasn't. He's had a few incidents this season. We've had obviously Imola and Spain and the start of Italy, where they didn't collide, the two title rivals. We've had obviously Italy, like halfway through the Italian Grand Prix, and Britain, where they have collided. But other than that, Verstappen's had easily his best season of his career, and he is putting in incredibly consistent performances. I think since the start of 2020, the only races he's finished where he hasn't finished on the podium have been Turkey last year and Hungary this year, which is incredibly consistent.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's the new Lewis on that front, right? Those two have been known to just, they're up there every single time, and I clear those two are head and shoulders above everyone else. So yeah, I mean, all credit to him, but that's what you expect, right? How many years has he had in F1 now? It's quite a lot, isn't it?
I think it's 2015, so he's
in his seventh year then. Yeah, that's so long. Like, how long is the average career in F1? It's probably 7 years, right? Well, yeah, of course you got to, but even the longer lasting ones, some of them will only be 7 years. He might be, what is he, 24, 25? He might only be that. He's not even that, is he?
Yeah.
He's 24. He might be 24, but he's got the experience of someone who's 30 years old, and he's putting it to good use. Yeah,
and I mean, do you think that this season is his coming of age season, and that if he does win it this season, he is not? I think every world champion is a worthy winner, but just the performances he's put in, he almost, I would say, I don't like. Personally, I'm not the biggest Verstappen fan. But I would say that if he wins it, it's probably one of the most deserved championships. Probably, apart from the Hamilton victories, it's up there with a lot of them in how consistent he's been, how quick he's been. He probably does deserve to win the championship this year.
Yeah, there's been a lot of bad luck for him. There's no question about that. I mean, he's got to prove it. If he crumbles in the last few races, then he won't deserve to win it, right? Because that's how that works. But yeah, no, he's. I coming back to what you said. You said this was his coming of age season. I don't think that's true. I think maybe the second year with Ricciardo in the car, with him alongside him at Red Bull, that was kind of when he was. When he really showed what he was made of. But since then, he's just been waiting for Red Bull to give him that opportunity. Now he's got it. Now he's really seizing it with both hands. If more bad luck hits him, then yeah, we could be looking at a championship that Lewis Hamilton just does not deserve to win, I'm afraid.
Yeah,
I know that's a big call.
Yeah,
because I'm not a Verstappen fan, but he's looked faster this season, and there's no reason to believe that's going to change.
I think maybe what you could say, rather than Hamilton not deserving it, maybe Verstappen deserves it more. Just with the consistency. I mean, I was shocked when I saw the pre-race coverage that Verstappen has 9 pole positions to Hamilton's 3. Like, I didn't realise the gap was so big. I'd say if Hamilton does win it, he deserves it. If Verstappen does win it, I'd say that he probably deserves it more. I don't think you can have a world champion that doesn't deserve to be the world champion, because if you're up there by the final race and then manage to get those points to get it over the line, then clearly you've done something right.
I suppose deservedness only really comes down to, whether you were better than the opposition. So, people debate whether Nico was better than Lewis in 2016. Obviously, that's not the question here. But I think if Hamilton does win it this year, there's no way you can argue that he doesn't deserve it, really, because, like you said, Max has looked like the faster driver for a lot of the season, if not all of it. So if Lewis can then go on and beat him over a full season, obviously with Max's bad luck and whatever, he's still proved that he can beat a very, very quick driver, Lewis. So he would fully deserve it, I think, this season, if he does.
I mean, we'll talk about, if we talk about 2016 now, we think to the start of the season, Rosberg wins the first 4 races. Hamilton's a bit out of it. He deserves it off that. He gets those crucial points where it's needed. He comes back in Malaysia, where obviously we all know Hamilton's engine blows up. He comes back from being spun at the start to finishing on the podium and taking those, well, not even taking those points, but making the most of that opportunity. So you can't even say that Rosberg didn't deserve it. And I mean, Chinmay, do you think Verstappen... I was about to say, do you think Verstappen deserves it? I think it's without question that he does. But I mean, either if Hamilton wins it, do you think that Hamilton deserves it, maybe?
I would say both drivers are very, very deserving. I mean, though, I'm personally more of a Verstappen fan than Hamilton. I will be happy with either driver winning, because I'm just more happy about the fact that both these drivers have given us an excellent battle this year, and that's what I really look for in the Drivers' Championship. That the fact that there is a good championship battle fight, it doesn't matter, and the fact that the bad luck hasn't played too much of a role so far just yet. It's still very, very close and going down to the wire, even with just 5 races to go.
Yeah, as you say, 5 races to go, so we'll have to wait and see what happens over those last few races. And we are back with the Warwick F1 show, and we've sort of finished talking about the front 2 drivers and the race in general. So we'll come to some of the other positions, starting off with our quintessential third place battle this season, McLaren versus Ferrari, which, as we mentioned before, didn't really go anywhere, but the first lap was interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, the first lap was very interesting. You had wheel-to-wheel between all 4 of them, I think, with the Ferraris coming out on top to start with. Yeah, it's just a shame it didn't carry out the whole race, really. I was quite looking forward to that. But, yeah, first lap was absolutely great.
It was a fantastic move by Norris, wasn't it? It kind of was. Like, that was crazy. He had so much overspeed going in the straight. I reckon if Leclerc wasn't there, he would have absolutely done both of them. But I guess the rear of that Ferrari putting himself at risk kind of saved the day for his teammate, right?
Oh yeah, I was convinced that Norris was going to go straight into Leclerc, and that would have made it a bit more. That would have made it quite interesting if we see the Ferrari. Have they collided this season?
Who, the Ferraris?
Or no, just any Ferrari or McLaren combination.
I can't remember either of them crashing into each other anyway.
No, they've been quite civil, but obviously we go into it, as we say, nothing happens. Leclerc finishes 4th, Ricciardo 5th, Sainz 7th, Norris 8th, with Bottas splitting the 2 and bringing the gap down to, I want to say, 4 points between the 2 teams.
Yeah, I think it's 3.5 or something like that. It's very, very small.
Half a point. We don't like the half a point.
We don't. They look so ugly on the point scoring table.
It's not even useful to decide who wins the title if we get a half a point showdown, because they both scored it, and for that we have to blame George Russell. But Ferrari, McLaren, I mean, I don't know. I don't think anyone really expected one team to be better at this track than the other, and I think we saw that in the results. Sainz finishing behind Leclerc, Norris finishing behind Ricciardo this time, which isn't something which isn't something we've seen. Obviously, we saw it at Italy, but then Russia, Norris obviously dominating that race until the unfortunate rain that came through. What happened in Turkey between the McLarens? Oh, they just had an off day. I don't think either of them.
Yeah, they finished fairly low back, didn't they?
Yeah, was gonna dominate the other. But do you think that maybe Ricciardo is coming through? A bit better.
I think it's just the added confidence he's had since Italy. I think definitely since Italy, he's definitely come a lot closer to Norris. And let's be honest, Danny Ricciardo is, I think, American at heart. He loves Texas so much, and he generally does like the COTA circuit a lot anyway. So I'm not totally surprised that Ricciardo did end up being in front of Norris this time around.
And yeah, maybe he was buoyed by being able to drive Dale Earnhardt's NASCAR. It's NASCAR, right? IndyCar, NASCAR. Yeah,
no, it's NASCAR. Yeah,
yeah. I'm not up to date with my American motorsports. But
you could see him absolutely beaming the whole way around the lap.
That was the thing. You could see him smiling.
Yeah, you got a little tweet from Dale Earnhardt Jr. saying, really appreciate that you love my dad so much. Basically, that's very wholesome.
I think that is the thing. It's not, if you do appreciate it enough, then clearly you're going to show the car some respect. And obviously, we're not experts on NASCAR, but we know Dale Earnhardt was probably one of the legends, probably the Senna of the sport, maybe
something like that.
Maybe 90s, but then tragically dies too soon.
I'll be honest, I've got absolutely no idea about NASCAR, but I think that's the case.
Yeah, and he was a fan favourite. He was absolutely brutal with his overtakes on track. He'd put you in the wall and then he'd just admit to it after the race. But that kind of made everyone love him. So yeah, hopefully Danny Rick doesn't start doing that. But other than that, he can look up to his rival all he can look up to his role model all he likes. I like the helmet as well. Did you see that?
Oh, there were 10.
There were, to be fair,
helmets.
Yeah. Ricciardo's was the best. I promise you that.
I mean, I remember the days where you weren't even allowed to change your helmet, which I think is something. Actually, that is something we'll come on to. We'll talk about the American culture around the race in general, because I think it's something to be discussed. But first, some more incidents throughout the grid. Alpine, especially sassy on the radio, being I think it was Alonso with Raikkonen first, and then Alonso with Giovinazzi. I didn't have commentary, so I didn't hear the radio messages, but just sort of run through what was being said.
I'll be honest, we didn't really have that either, I don't think. At least I couldn't hear it particularly, but I did see it getting a little bit tasty because he had to go at both the Alphas on track.
Yeah, so do you want me to run through what happened, or are we assuming that the listeners know by now?
I think just run through it.
All right, so at turn 1, Alonso and Raikkonen come side by side, with Raikkonen trying to go around the outside, and Alonso squeezes him off the track. Raikkonen has nowhere to go, very close to touching, but he goes off track, makes the overtake happen, holds onto it, no penalty. Now, I think Giovinazzi versus Alonso. Alonso's trying to make the overtake. Was it the other way? Which way around was it? It was Alonso trying to overtake.
Alonso's trying to overtake Giovinazzi.
He goes again, tries to go around the outside, but he just misses the corner and goes wide, and then has to come onto the track. So what Alpine, and he gets penalised, gets told to give the place back. So what Alpine are trying to say is, Raikkonen's gone off track and got the place, but we've gone off track and not got the place. So what's the deal there? And obviously the deal there is that Alonso was the one forcing Raikkonen off the track, whereas in the other situation, Alonso's off the track before Giovinazzi is even anywhere close to the edge of the track. So, obvious key difference. Alonso took advantage from leaving the track, and Raikkonen did not. That's all there is to it. So sorry to ruin your talking point. I'm sure you'll make something more of it.
No, but then Alpine. Well, I guess what we'll do, I will make something more of it because it's my job. But we get to the point where, obviously, this track especially, a lot of the overtaking points do lend themselves to forcing another driver off the track. Turn 1 especially, like if you're on the outside at turn 1, it's very easy for the person on the inside to just drift across a bit. And then even when you get to, it's turn 10, right, at the back, on the back straight, that slow corner, even that sequence lends itself to, like, forcing the other driver off the track. And I mean, we've spoken about this so much, like, on the show, about how, whether it is okay to force another driver off the track if the consequences aren't as severe. I mean, we saw it in Turkey with Sainz and Vettel. Like, they collided, Sainz got ahead, but obviously because they kept going, it was fine. And we've seen it here. Raikkonen, he's off the track, but he's been forced off the track by Alonso and then gets the position. So, is that all right? And then Giovinazzi, Alonso's gone off the track, but then falls behind him. But then obviously with the way the turn works, if you're on the inside, you can dive back down the inside and get ahead, but then gives the position back. It's... I think we've always said, it's just because there's so many different situations that you can have, it's really hard to adjudicate between them.
Yeah, it's not clear cut anywhere, really, is it? Rules are rules, but at the end of the day, the situations are so different a lot of the time that you can't apply one thing to another thing. In this case, I think, Raikkonen had nowhere to go around the outside, so he has two choices basically. He can keep going and hope he doesn't get a penalty, or he can back out and just let Alonso back through. Whereas Alonso absolutely has somewhere to go on the track, but decides to keep going around wide. I'm not sure whether he missed his braking point or whether he just kept going wide, but either way, he's gained an advantage where he didn't need to, or didn't have to, but did, and took that place.
And then Alonso, for some reason, ended up celebrating on the radio. I think if I remember the radio message correctly, he goes around the outside, obviously takes Giovinazzi outside the track, and then he's ended up celebrating on the radio. And then it's just pretty funny just watching the radio messages, and then obviously Alpine just complaining to Michael Massey. That was pretty fun spectacle to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think Alonso might be rubbing off on Alpine. Just with because we've had a few times this season, Alonso's complained about what he perceives to be differing treatment of drivers based on nationality. I'm not sure how true that is, but then obviously we saw it in Russia as well. He takes that first corner. He's within the rules, and personally, if you're within the rules, then if you're like clear cut within the rules, then it's fine. But it's these ones where you don't really it's a bit of a grey area. And then with an Alpine come on the radio to Michael Massey talking about it, Alonso celebrating on the radio the overtake. Alpine seems to be becoming a bit sassy. I think that's what I'd say.
Yeah, Alonso's never been like this clean figure in Formula One, has he? He's been known for incidents and being angry in the past. And yeah, I think he's trying to make something out of nothing again. I mean, if we go back to Russia, he didn't get a penalty for that. He's complaining about stuff that the media is talking about, but he's talking about F1 having bias. There was no bias there because he didn't get a penalty.
I think he might have been talking about the bias just before the race. I think it was...
Okay.
Maybe?
Was he trying to distract from what his corner?
I thought he spoke about the Norris incident.
Yeah, he did.
So maybe it was just after. So yeah,
I'm kind of with him on that. I think that was one that was a clear-cut penalty, right? Because we saw Tsunoda do it twice at Austria.
Yeah, Austria.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't know whether it's clearly written in the rules that if there's some other reason, like you've got slick tyres on a wet track, then that's not allowed. But that's one of those technical ones, right? That the same way that Vettel didn't have enough fuel, that if you do it, you should just get a penalty. So yeah, I don't understand why they've done that, but I also don't understand why they've done anything this season. Yeah. It's been all over the place. So he's calling racism, right? Because or xenophobia, I guess. But yeah, that's a bit much for me.
Yeah, I mean, but it's always been Alonso. It's always been the way he talks. And to be honest, I think I'd agree that I would have given Norris a penalty. We think to Tsunoda this season, Hamilton in 2019 in Germany, it's a bit of a different situation. But then you could argue, if we are going off the safety aspect, that Norris goes long but is allowed to come back in because obviously he's on slick tyres and we don't want him doing another lap in those torrential conditions. But then Hamilton in 2019, he's knocked his front wing off. We don't want debris all over the track. So maybe it does, like, that Norris decision seems weird, and maybe you could understand what Alonso was saying, but I think that's a bit far. And then it's just, I think it's just been Alonso and Alpine this season have seemed to be especially looking at the rules and looking for those inconsistencies and either benefiting from them or complaining when other people benefit from them.
Things I get it, because you've got to complain about these things, because wherever you can get an edge, you've got to get an edge. That's why you see, in at Silverstone, that Verstappen Hamilton incident, they're both on the radio to Michael Massey saying, "Help! We've been wronged." So you've got to complain, but at the same time, they've got to dial it down, because rules are the rules. So they will be applied wherever they're needed.
Yeah, and I mean, you understand it's a sport, but we'll have to wait and see if it happens for the last 5 races. I mean, did you want to add anything, Chinmay?
No, I think everyone's been clear cut with what they said.
Yeah. So we'll take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the American spectacle around COTA, and I'll get everyone's views on that. And we're coming into, I guess, the final part of our US Grand Prix review, talking about maybe not the race, but the spectacle around it. So what we'll do is we'll start with the crowd, actually. 400,000, I think was the official attendance. Remarkably round for such a sporting event, but we'll let them have it. But I think I saw somewhere that it was like 240,000 in 2018. You really have to say the Netflix effect has worked incredibly well in America to get F1 onto the map.
Yeah, it's just been excellent to see how Liberty Media has really pushed the publicity of Formula One, especially in the likes of America. I mean, the fact that we have got 2 American Grand Prix next year coming in Miami and COTA. And yeah, it's really good to see Americans coming back to Formula One thanks to stuff like Netflix.
Do you think it is? Do you think it is Netflix? I know we've got Drive to Survive. That's another thing. Max Verstappen saying that he doesn't want to watch Drive, or he doesn't want to be part of it because it creates narratives that aren't there. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan. I haven't watched any of the 3 seasons in full because I've always, I personally, for me, I know what's going to happen in the races, so it's like not much point, and I keep up to date enough with it. I know probably a lot of the storylines that have gone on. But do you think that for newer fans, it is probably the perfect thing to get people interested in F1?
Yeah, I'm going to pull out like full publicity officer mode. If you just think it's just Drive to Survive that Liberty Media have introduced, that's doing such a massive disservice. They do so many little things, and maybe it's just because I'm entering. I've come back to the sport just as Liberty Media have started taking over, so I've got a good perspective of where it is and where it was and where it is now. But the engagement goes far beyond that. So yes, you're absolutely right. Drive to Survive has done absolute wonders, especially in the US, to pull people in. But so has Driver of the Day. So has all the stuff that they've been pushing the teams to get. I can't go behind the scenes, but there has got to be a team at Liberty Media that they're walking into the contract meetings and go, you have to produce this or you have to do that, right? I mean, we've seen the McLaren Unbox series, that's always been popular, but now every team is doing it. And you see, I think also we're entering an age where since the terrible Wendy's tweets, that these brands are starting to realise that it's more important to be engaged with fans in a more personal way, and that's really pulling people in as well. So yeah, there's so many reasons why F1 is growing, especially in America. Drive to Survive is only a little part of that.
Yeah, and I mean, if we're talking about engagement, we see it on the social media side, like Twitter admins a lot more personal, like they get on with like the people that follow them. I think even yesterday F1 put out a meme of like, you know, like Shaq on the podium, taller, but then all the other drivers were made smaller, and that it was just made by a random Twitter user, but that's being taken from that Twitter user, being put out on the F1's live feed, and then especially on the YouTube side as well, we've had engagement, we've had collaborations between fan channels. So like I know Josh Ravel made a mid-season preview or mid-season review of the F2 season. I mean, we've had the virtual Grand Prix, Tiamat Marduk, Arava, people like that, and then WTF1. Matt Gallagher's now doing the esports coverage. That's the one. It's just F1 seems to have really nailed that crossover between fan engagement and viewer engagement and the sport. We've got fans coming to the races. Fans can get involved through Drive to Survive. We've got like YouTube channels. We've got YouTube channels taking part with F1, getting more involved with F1. F1 inviting people to, like, YouTubers who are fans of the events to take part either in their YouTube channel, take part in coverage of esports, or just inviting them to races. And I would say that F1 as a sport is making the most of the amount of marketing or the amount of untapped potential that a lot of sports can do. And I think Drive to Survive, as Jack said, might just be the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I spend an ungodly amount of my day on TikTok, and the amount of brands like Red Bull and Alpine and whatever that reply to people's comments on other videos or whatever, they really have upped the engagement recently, and it shows because we've had, as F1 Sock, a couple of Freshers Week Freshers Fair events, and an open day as well. And the amount of people that come up to me and say, I've got into it in the last couple of years, and I'm like, oh, you're a Drive to Survivor like I am, because that's how I got back into it. Because it gets people excited who don't think that they'd be into F1, because everyone goes, oh, it's just driving around a track, it's going to be boring. Then they watch Drive to Survive or something like that, and they're like, oh, this actually is quite interesting. It's good to see. I love it. Yeah,
and I think, especially with the new race coming in this year, if we can, I think that's the final piece of the puzzle that needs to come in. Just maybe not better racing, but just more like wheel-to-wheel, close racing, because then you get that sporting drama as well. Obviously, I think they've benefited hugely this year from having such a close title battle, and if we can continue that into 22, maybe even gain a few more like contenders. You've got maybe Hamilton and Verstappen this year, but next year you've got Hamilton, Verstappen, George Russell, you'd think would be up there, especially if Mercedes keep their dominance. But then if McLaren and Ferrari come back, you've got Norris, Leclerc, Sainz, Ricciardo, and then even if we get a team that we wouldn't think would be up there, and they go up there, we could have like an Alonso, a Vettel even coming back, and even maybe not Haas. We won't go that far.
Okay, it's not. I've not introduced it yet. Another conspiracy theory from me. I can't remember how many we've done.
We need a jingle for your conspiracy theories each week.
I'll have to go back and count how many there are. I'll start adding them in the comments. Liberty Media have had some say in what the 2022 regulations are, and they've made these cars look more like Indy cars to appeal to American fans. Is that possible, or is it just because we want closer racing?
You'd think that maybe there's a natural design philosophy if you want ground effect, but the way the cars have looked, personally, my favourite cars since I started watching were the 2017 non-halo but wide body designs. I really like the wide body designs that we've got now. Obviously, I recognise the drawbacks with the racing, but just they look like proper race cars. Just low to the ground, wide, like thick tires. They look like they
are sexy, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. And without the halo, I think they did look slightly better. Obviously, we needed the halo for safety, but with the 2022 cars, it'll be more integrated as opposed to bolted on.
Yeah, there's nothing better though than hopping on the F1 game and you're whipping around like a Monza or something in 2010 Red Bull or like an 06 Renault. Oh, they just look so clean without that halo. But yeah, we've got to have it, obviously.
Yeah, but I think that maybe there is a benefit of it looks like IndyCar, but would you say that many American fans coming into just motorsport in general, or are they coming from the Indy cars, the NASCARs, where they would normally watch that motorsport in America, and then coming over to the world side, I guess, with F1?
Maybe, but probably just because they want to have a look at more variety. But I think it's just how astonishingly good job Liberty Media has been in getting Formula One advertised over to America. I think that's what's really done more of an impact in bringing American fans into the sport.
Chinmay's out here sounding like a Liberty Media advertising worker.
But yeah, I mean, they have brought more fans to America. They've also brought more celebrities to America. And we saw that before and after the race. Obviously, we've got a traditional Martin Brundle grid walk. I mean, Tom, you had a few things to say about this.
Yeah, I'm very torn on the whole aspect of like the off-track action, because I love it in places like Monaco and Spa or wherever. It's Australia. It's great. I love it. But then the one I have a real gripe with, and there must have been others, but when Brundle's on his grid walk, and you got Megan Thee Stallion walking up there with 8 security, and they're all going, "Oh, go away! You can't talk to her." He can do what he wants. He's Martin Brundle. He runs the show. You know what I mean? Like, don't be coming in here as a celebrity trying to throw your weight about in a place that you realistically you probably don't have an interest in. You're there for PR. It's fine if they do, and I love the ones that get involved. But I couldn't stand watching that video, seeing all the security tell Martin Brundle to go away. I wasn't having it.
I mean, I think to be fair to her, she did look like she was fine for an interview. I think she was trying to talk to him in a way, but
yeah,
it was her security that really weren't having it. And I love the sass of I can do what I want.
Yeah, I have no problem with her at all. It's just like the way that situation played out. Not a big fan, and you do see it every now and then. But in general, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Is that like Monaco is one of the most glorious weekends of the year. Like, the amount of people that say it's their favourite track, despite the racing being awful, because it's so majestic and historic.
Yeah. And I think you do see celebrities getting involved. I know Ben Stiller was everywhere. Like, I think it was in the Ferrari garage, Mercedes garage, and I think it's fine. Like, it's a PR thing. Like, there will be loads of celebrities that go to the Super Bowl that don't watch like American football. Like, I'd go to the Super Bowl. I'd barely watch American football. It's a spectacle. It's an event. We have Monaco, and maybe Austin or Miami is going to be the next one that is also a spectacle. But then we also saw after the race quite an interesting podium ceremony, which, to be honest, I quite liked. It was so typically American. It was less of the whole arrogance and more just, we're going to embrace the silliness.
I don't think you could have been more stereotypically American there, could you? Really, they've fully embraced it. They're like, this is what we are. We're just going to go over the top like we always do. And they seem to absolutely love it. I mean, Shaq pulling up in that great big Mustang-looking thing with the handlebar moustache on the front. It was unreal.
Yeah, and I don't know whose decision it was to leave like Shaq, like rather than putting him off to the side for the podium, so just leaving him in the middle. And then we had the comical sight of Shaq almost being as tall as Max Verstappen, who stood on, like, I don't know how big those podiums are, but they
must be a foot or so.
Yeah, they can't be that small. And he's taller than Hamilton, who is... Obviously, F1 drivers aren't the tallest. I know we saw that with the basketball before. It's just like the tallest F1 driver being... being like just towered over by the NBA players, but just watching Shaq be taller than Hamilton while he stood on the podium will never not make me laugh for a while.
To be fair, George Russell is 6'2". Like, NBA players are absolutely massive.
I'm just googling how tall the F1 drivers are now.
Oh God!
I just wanted to see Shaq next to Yuki. I'm so
Tsunoda's
disappointed that didn't happen.
Tsunoda must be like 5'4" or something.
I'll get it up quickly.
Is he actually 5'2"? That's
God.
Tom. But yeah, that's. How tall is Shaq? He's at least 7 foot, isn't he?
Shaq
ridiculous.
is insanely tall.
He's like 7'4" or something like that, isn't he? Probably. I don't know.
So
we'll find out.
Yuki Tsunoda's.
This is nothing to do with F1, really, is it? It's just like so interesting.
We're really pushed for content here. Yuki Tsunoda is 5'2".
See, I know my Formula One driver heights.
And the tallest driver, I think. So Russell, Latifi, Giovinazzi, and Ocon are all 6'1".
Oh, Ocon looks big, doesn't he? To be fair.
Ocon's tall.
But
Hamilton. So Lewis Hamilton's 5'7".
Yeah, stood next to Shaq, any of them are going to look, absolutely tiny.
Yeah, and for reference, Shaq is 2'16". What's that in foot and inches?
I've got absolutely no idea.
Yeah, I'll go on the Wikipedia page. 7'1".
7'1". And the funniest thing is seeing Shaq stood next to, I think, the tallest NBA player ever. I want to say, I can't remember his name, but he dwarfs Shaq. So him stood next to Yuki would be something that I would absolutely pay to see.
So what? Yuki's 5'2". Yuki's almost 2 foot shorter than Shaq.
That is wild.
But yeah, I think that ends the US Grand Prix review. I mean, let's embrace the Americans. They always make us feel a bit better. Has anyone got any last words before we go into a break and then start talking about the Mexican Grand Prix as well as getting our predictions in place?
I'm just really excited for Miami now.
Yeah,
I see how over the top they can go.
I think, is that race in the day?
I would think so, but it would look so much better at night.
I don't know who's made that decision, but put it at night. Because it just would look better. And we are back for the final segment of the Warwick F1 show this week, moving away from Austin, but not too far, moving down to the bordering country, to Mexico, and Mexico City for the return of the Mexican Grand Prix, a race last seen in 2019, obviously. The pandemic meant we couldn't have it in 2020. But it's a race that... When did it come onto the calendar?
I want to say it came back in 2015.
I was thinking 15. That sounded right.
Because from what I can remember, Rosberg won 15, and then we've had 2 Hamiltons and 2 Verstappen wins since then. And obviously it wasn't on the calendar last year because of the pandemic.
I will check that now.
I'm fairly confident that's right, but... You are the encyclopedia.
So, yeah. So Rosberg 15, Hamilton 16, 2 Verstappens in 17 and 18, and then Hamilton in 19. That's not... Is that... Oh, that was the podium where they came up from the floor, wasn't it?
Oh, God,
yeah. There's that one.
Mexico. I mean, right, what's your opinions of the track? Personally, I think it has always been clouded by the fact that Mercedes have never done well here, in that I haven't liked it as much as I probably should have with an unbiased cap on. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I think fairly balanced team-wise. Like you said, Mercedes haven't been as dominant as they have been at other tracks. 3 wins out of 5 is still fairly good going, but as Mercedes have been the last few years, they probably should have been pumping out wins every year. The tracks, it's one of those ones where there's a bit of everything, which is nice because it means that slightly cars that are better at other things can do well. There's great big pit straight, but then there's also like the S's, which is more downforce related.
Yeah, and I mean it's a very unique track for one reason, and that's the altitude. It's easily the highest track of the season. I think Austria's at 700 meters altitude, but this race is over 2,000 meters, and that, I mean, outside of Europe, or in Europe, that you're looking at, that's like snow-capped mountains and all of that. So regardless of the long straight, I think it's one of the longest in F1. The teams are running, I think it's either the highest downforce or the highest after Monaco. Which it's a weird like dichotomy. Just like you think, if that track is at like normal altitude, like 100 meters, 200 meters, something like that, the downforce they'd be running would be like T-tray wings. It'd be like Monza, but they actually have to run like properly like vertical wings just to get that grip in.
Yeah, I mean, I want to go a fraction back. I just want to put my take on the track as well, because I'd forgotten this. Stadium section. I think it's turn 10, is it? I'll see now.
That's the one thing I can't do is turn. So 13, 14, 15.
Okay.
Is like the stadium.
All right. But I think that is where, because this was, is this a Tilke track?
I want to say it's an original that's been updated by Tilke.
Okay, because I seem to remember Tilke was the one who at least had some say on that. That is where he does incredibly well. He takes architecture and the racetrack and kind of mushes them together. And the atmosphere that the Mexican fans provide is like off the charts in that section. That's brilliant. So same as Abu Dhabi, the way he does that with the architecture as well.
Yeah, I don't want to nerd out on you here, but it was actually designed in 1953 by a student for his dissertation, but then updated by Tilke to include, slightly more room for press and all of that sort of thing.
Mm. I mean, they took out, I think it's called the Peraltada.
They did,
that legendary corner, sort of like, it's almost like a parabolica in a way. I don't know, why was it too unsafe? Was it just because obviously we've got the parabolica, maybe even that's not in a way safer than the Peraltada. They take it out, but to be honest, they've replaced it with the stadium section. While not great for obviously the overtaking aspect, it's a very good, like during the race you get that atmosphere, and then after the race they have the podium in that section, not on the pit straight, and I think that's probably the correct decision.
Yeah, that's one of my favourite few corners on the whole calendar. I think the stadium section, just because of the atmosphere you get, and some of the pictures you can get out of that is incredible with all the fans behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going back a little bit as well to my opinions. I'm a pretty big fan of the track. I mean, there's always action happening in the first few corners, and there's so many places to overtake, and there's also that slightly added difficulty for the drivers with the SS section, and it's just really wonderful just watching the F1 cars, especially like Tom said, going through that stadium section. It's not great for racing, but the spectacle it provides is just something magical. But thanks to that atmosphere the Mexican fans provide.
Yeah, and because we've not got that much time left, we've come on to our predictions. But first, we'll look at our previous predictions. So, as of this week, Chinmay has switched sides. He's betrayed the F1 Society and recognised that the better side of the desk.
That is very, very questionable.
Yeah,
We've got the president of Warwick F1 here. We can't make him go and do raw stuff. Apologies, Chinmay, the other sacrifice this week. You'll take the L for us, okay? Thank you.
True, but with our predictions last week, I think I'm willing to give you the victory here. So I've got them here quickly to save Jack just diving through, looking for the predictions. So the Warwick F1 SOC went for a Verham podium, Norris top 5, Latifi 18th, and an obnoxious national anthem singer. So you got the top 2 of the podium correct. Probably even would have been third without the engine penalty. Norris wasn't top 5, but it was another McLaren in Ricciardo. Latifi was 17th instead of 18th. Who did he outqualify that wasn't the 2 Hasses?
It was Kimi. Kimi was 18th.
Kimi was 18th. And then you went obnoxious national anthem singer. Anyone know who sung the national anthem?
No, I don't remember. I vaguely saw it, but I didn't recognise who it was.
That was American, probably obnoxious. And then we went for Hamilton, Bottas, Verstappen, 2 right, but both in the wrong order. Ferrari scored more than McLaren. That was right. Hamilton Grand Slam. I don't think he did. Oh, no, he got the fastest lap. He did one of the 4. And then Schumacher Q2. That was probably the worst prediction I've made in a long time. So I think because you got the 2 of the podium totally correct over one of my alternate predictions being correct, I'm willing to hand you the victory. Plus the fact that with your alternate predictions, you were probably quite close.
That's very gracious, Will.
Yeah. I'd expect this level of graciousness when I eventually work out how to predict things well. But so you, Warwick.
To be fair, like none of our predictions have been very close at all in general. Like, so yes, if you get better than us, we'll admit to it.
Okay. So Warwick F1 take a 2-1 lead, coming back from 1-0 down from when we started this. But obviously now we've got our Mexico Grand Prix review prediction. That's reviews in 2 weeks. But yeah, first the predictions, and we will come to this time the Warwick F1 Society first.
Do you want the podium first, or do you want the random ones?
First, I can write it down.
Right. Okay. So we've got Verstappen to win it, followed by Perez and Leclerc.
So was it Leclerc?
It is indeed, yeah.
So Verstappen, Perez, and Leclerc, and then the 3 general ones.
So we've got Red Bull to retake the constructors. I think they're 23 behind at the moment.
Something like that.
Red Bull to retake constructors. We've got both Alpines to score points, and then we've got 1 red flag in either race or quali.
Ooh, that's an interesting one. I hadn't thought about that, because you don't have to include this in the prediction, but where's the red flag coming from, do you think, the most likely option?
Well, I mean, most likely it's race, right? It's a longer session, so... but, yeah, hang on. Now that we said that...
No, you said it.
Oh, okay. Well, it's not included anyway, so...
Yeah, you don't... I mean... Because obviously I want to say we had a red flag in 2019. They must have red flagged that Bottas.
It was only a yellow flag because Verstappen sped through the yellow flags and then got a three-place grid penalty to put him back in 4th.
So, Warwick F1 Verstappen, Perez, Leclerc, top 3. Red Bull take the constructors' lead. Alpine double points and a red flag in the race or the quali.
Absolutely.
And Chinmay, do you want to read out our predictions as soon as I get them up again?
Yep, so our podium is Verstappen, Perez, and Hamilton to take the podium.
I mean, you sort of have to go Verstappen, Perez, Hamilton, or Verstappen, Perez at least. Unless something terrible happens, this should be the second 1-2 of the season, right? Yeah.
You'd like to think so, wouldn't you?
Well, I wouldn't. I'm a Hamilton fan.
I would.
And then our 3 alternate predictions.
We got a Verstappen Grand Slam.
Okay.
A Red Bull session clean sweep.
So what we mean by that is they are top of every single session.
Including like Q1 and Q2?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're going Q1. So every competitive session where it starts to matter. So Q1,
7 sessions.
Including FPs.
Are we including? What do you want to include?
Well, it's your prediction.
Do we want to include practice? What do you think? If it's more bold, we get more credit, but we also might get it wrong. Every competitive session.
Why not?
So the 3 qualifying in the race.
Yeah.
We'll include practice 3 because that's competitive as well.
Okay.
So
every Saturday or Sunday session.
Yes.
Okay.
Red Bull top all of Saturday and Sunday.
That's fine.
And finally,
Vettel to finish in the top 8.
we've gone Vettel. This was a Chinmay prediction. He thinks that Vettel. Well, I mean, just go through it. What do you think Vettel top 8?
I mean, yeah, Vettel's not actually... Yeah, Vettel's generally good at the track. I mean, the last 2 races, he did finish 2nd place. So I thought, why not go a bit more risky and take the top 8?
Yep, and so that means Raw Sports predictions: Verstappen, Perez, and Hamilton top 3. Verstappen Grand Slam, Red Bull top of all the sessions on Saturday and Sunday, and then a Vettel top 8 finish. But that is the end of the show. I mean, does anyone, any final thoughts? Anything they want to say? Any?
I am
quick
looking
comments?
forward to the end of this season. I know I've said I think Verstappen's going to run away with it, but we are like closer than it's been for so long. It'll be such a good end, I hope.
Yeah, just gotta hope that Verstappen, he might just run away with it. Gotta hope that doesn't happen. But that is the end of the show. Thank you for coming on, Chinmay.
Thank you.
And Jack.
No problem. I'll be here next week as well.
Yeah. And finally, Tom, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Love the show.
Thank you. Thank you for listening each week.